Comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed.
Hi, welcome to Writers in Focus. I'm your host, James Taylor, and today we have a treat. I am honored to have as my guest Miss Genna Sapia Ruffin. May I call you Jenna?
Please.
Welcome to the Atlanta
Nice
Fulton Public Library. You're no stranger to Atlanta. By way of introduction, we're going to talk about Jenna's book. It's called A Memoir, David Ruffin, My Temptation. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard right. David Ruffin, My Temptation. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, you fell in love with a man named David Ruffin, who was at one time the lead singer for perhaps the greatest male vocalist group of the last century, of any century, the Temptations.
Yes.
When I woke up this morning, and using my wife as my witness, I put on the Ultimate Collection, the Temptations, listened to My Girl, of course. I listened to my favorite tune, I Wish It Would Rain. I went on YouTube, saw your son, David Ruffin Jr., and I said to myself, I can't wait to interview this woman. And I've read your book, Jenna. This book, along with your fantastic website, is a work in progress. It's your memoir of your life with David Ruffin. And to use a coarse term, and I don't wish it to be coarse, you were David Ruffin's common-law wife for many a year. You met him, I'm looking at my notes, on June 21st in Carrs Beach, Maryland. You were wearing a bathing suit. Talk about that. Let's go way back.
1964.
64.
Father's Day.
Father's Day.
Well, it was a beach, so I was wearing a bathing suit, though it was very modest by today's standards, and interestingly enough, it was the same color as the outfit he was wearing. I didn't know who he was. I just went there with my girlfriend, and we went like two separate directions, and I didn't know who the Temptations were. Actually, there were about 30 acts on the show. Carrs Beach, they don't have these kinds of venues anymore, really, but it was like a beach, it was like a bar, outside tiki kind of place, food, rides, amusement park, concert or music place. I won't call it a music hall, just a big room, probably as big as this.
Like the Shore in New Jersey, or like a Bruce Springsteen kind of place where you're rocking on the beach or something like that?
No, it wasn't on the beach. It was inside of a big building.
Gotcha. And this was a tour with the Temptations?
It was the Motown Review. It was a bus.
Ah.
Not the tour with the Temptations. This was bus. Then there came station wagon. Then there came station wagon plus limo.
Gotcha.
You're talking bus right now. They weren't all Motown acts, though. Stevie Wonder was there. He was 12 or 11. Temptations, a lot of people were there from Chuck Jackson was the headliner. He wasn't with Motown at all. Some people called Mitty Collier, and some acts you'll never probably hear of at this point. The Temptations were just coming out, really. They'd been working in their field and trying to make good as the Primes prior to that, and the two other separate groups that they were before they merged into the Primes. But David had just joined the group less than 6 months prior to that. The Way You Do the Things You Do was out, and that was his first time with them.
Wasn't he playing it repeatedly, if I recall from the book?
Yeah, but I want to say about that particular song, though, I find it interesting and endearing. You don't hear him lead at all. He's not leading, of course. You could barely hear him in the background because he's still very shy at that time, strangely enough, unbelievably. But I can hear him in the background. I hear his voice every time he sings. But, yeah, so then, he saw me. I was sitting in the crowd up on top of some guy's shoulders because I couldn't see, so he saw me from the stage, and I didn't see him. I didn't know who they were, didn't care. And I guess, and he told me this later, that he told Eddie Kendrick, I'm going to marry her. So the owner of the venue also saw me, and he knew me. I knew him from Baltimore, which is where I was living at the time, and didn't know he owned the place, and he called me backstage, so I watched the rest of the show from backstage. And while Chuck Jackson was on throwing his clothes up in the air and women screaming and falling all over each other, somebody was buzzing in my ear, and I don't know what somebody was saying, but I was like irritated because I was trying to watch Chuck Jackson. And after it was over, he was still standing there, and that was David. And he was blah, blah, blah in my ear. And I had to laugh at him because he was so persistent. He was still there. So I said, okay, what? So he was like, well, la, 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 la. My name is David Ruffino.
He used that name, that's
yes, right. Yes. You'd probably just heard of Ruffino wine, but he was always kind of ahead of himself. And later in life, he told me, oh, well, I said, why'd you lie about your name? He's like, oh, well, that was I was going to change it. I was like, oh, okay. That was always his excuse. But I was going to.
Jenna, let me set you up for this. It's a remarkable memoir. We just talked about the time you first met David Ruffin in 1964.
Okay.
You also went to his funeral in 1999. You knew him for almost...
91.
91, I'm sorry. You knew him for almost 30 years, off and on. And being a librarian, I did my research. I looked at a couple of Motown histories. I looked at the Otis Williams history of the Temptations. And your name is never mentioned. And I think, well, actually, in this version of your book, a memoir, David Ruffin, you thank Otis Williams, the founder and keeper of the flame for the Temptations, for not mentioning you because he inspired you to write this book.
Yep.
And if, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for that tortured way to put it, but you've got a lot to say that has never been told about this man and the Temptations. Yeah, I love this book.
Thank you.
So how do you want to do this? Because there's a lot in this book. Let's talk about some of the research you did in uncovering David Ruffin's early life. I love this town, Why Not, Mississippi. Talk about his father, his mother, his upbringing.
Well,
it's also in the book, folks.
Yeah. Actually, I've found out more about his childhood after the book was put out, which is why I'm going to re-release it again in the fall.
But you keep on you have a fantastic website where you keep on adding this information.
Because my life keeps changing.
Yeah.
Go figure. And so his oldest brother, half-brother, Quincy, who had the same father, different mother, if I have that correct, had written this book called Mississippi Tears quite some time ago, and I really never really read it until 2 years ago. When I really read it, it made a lot of things clear to me why David became the man that David became. Because his childhood was extremely tortured, if I could even say that. And
it was.
His father, according to the brother, mind you, this is not me making this up or, pulling it out of the air, but his older brother, Quincy, talked about how his father, Eli, who was a preacher, I guess, used to beat the boys with a bullwhip. In which, boy, to me it gets very deep right here because, now we're talking sharecroppers and now we're talking slave masters, and I'm going, this gets very deep here, and who's to blame?
Well, there's also an expression, too. David Ruffin was, by all standards, a country boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was proud of that. I actually had a phrase called Country Capricorns about him and Rod Stewart, who is another story.
That's another story.
But, so David became an abusive man and didn't have a father for a model of how to be a good father, a good husband, or a good man in general.
Wasn't even really good to his mother.
No.
Talk about, is it Earline?
Well, Earline was his father. Earline. His mother actually died about, I'd say, 10 months, according to what he told me, after his childbirth. And by quote-unquote complications, but that was Mississippi, and it was 1941, and she was black. I mean, complications probably where there was no doctor around for like 100 miles. So anyway, she died, and his father, Eli, married Earline, who was a school teacher. And Earline raised him. She raised him as her own. In fact, if I can say this on camera, sorry guys, he was her favorite.
That's okay. It's okay.